So we all know that one person who's just a little too into violence, right? Well, it turns out Earth used to be absolutely packed with creatures that would make that person look like a kindergartner teacher having a tea party. Because these are just a few of a ton of different prehistoric animals that were psychopathic killers. Obviously, they're not actual psychopaths, but if you were to run into them, they might as well be one. They're scary. So here's something that'll mess with your head. You know how sharks have rows and rows of teeth that just keep growing back? Well, this one fish looked at that whole system and said, nah, I'm good, and just evolved giant bone scissors in its mouth instead. Meet Dunkleosteus. This thing lived about 360 million years ago, which is so long ago that trees were still figuring out how to be trees. And while everything else was running around with normal fish teeth, Dunkleosteus was out here rocking what can only be described as nature's first guillotine. Picture this, you're swimming around the Devonian seas, minding your own fishy business, when suddenly this 30-foot armored nightmare comes at you. No teeth, just two massive bone blades that could slice through literally anything. And I literally mean anything. Other fish, gone. Armor plating might as well be paper. Fellow Dunkleosteus, yeah, they ate each other too, because apparently regular cannibalism wasn't metal enough. And the really messed up part, these jaws could snap shut in milliseconds. Not seconds, milliseconds. You wouldn't even see it coming. One moment you're having a lovely fish swim, the next moment you're being processed but what's basically a 4-ton organic paper shredder. And here's where it gets weird. Scientists have found these things with bite marks from other Dunkleosteus all over their armor. So not only were they eating everything else, they were having full contact MMA fights with each other just for fun. Yeah, imagine being so bored that you pick fights with the only other thing on the planet that can actually hurt you. This fish was so good at being a psychopath that it dominated the oceans for millions of years. Nothing could touch it, and frankly, nothing wanted to touch it. Look at it. But even bone guillotines seem reasonable compared to fish that literally choked themselves to death trying to kill other things. So remember how I said Dunkleosteus was the ocean's ultimate predator? Well, in another period of time in history, evolution decided to try something different. Instead of making a fish that was really good at killing things, they made a fish that was really bad at knowing when to stop eating. This is Xiphactinus, and it holds the honor of being possibly the dumbest apex predator that ever lived. We're talking about a 20-foot fish that would see another fish that was almost as big as itself and think, yeah, I can probably fit that in my mouth. Now, you might have looked behind me and seen, oh, he's got 2 fish tanks. He must be interested in fish. And I am. And the one thing I know about fish is they love to eat. Fish will eat anything that you give them. That's just how they are. And Xiphactinus, well, it would try to eat. And sometimes it would succeed. And then other times it would die. We know this because paleontologists keep finding Xiphactinus fossils with entire fish still stuck in their throats. There's this one famous fossil where they found a 14-foot Xiphactinus with a 6-foot fish lodged inside it. Both fish died because apparently this thing never learned the concept of maybe this is too big. But here's what makes it even weirder. Xiphactinus wasn't some slow, lazy ambush predator. This thing was fast, and I mean really fast. It had this sleek torpedo body built for speed, which means it was actively chasing down prey and then making the worst possible decisions about what to do with it. Lots of animals overeat, but Xiphactinus took it to a whole different level. Death by gluttony is embarrassing enough though, but wait until you see the snake that could eat crocodiles. You know what's funny about nightmares? Well, they usually involve things that don't actually exist. Giant spiders, monsters under the bed, that kind of stuff. Which is great because it means you can wake up and feel better about the world. Well, I've got some bad news for you if you don't like snakes. Titanoboa was real. This snake lived in Colombia about 60 million years ago, and it was 42 feet long. Just to put that into perspective, that's longer than most school buses, and thicker than your torso. And it spent its days doing what giant snakes do, which is finding large animals and squeezing them until they stop moving. Now, most snakes today stick to reasonable prey. Mice, birds, maybe a rabbit if they're feeling ambitious. Titanoboa looked at a 15-foot crocodile and thought, yummy, it's my drive-through lunchtime at McDonald's. And it wasn't just eating them, it was winning fights against them regularly. We're talking about prehistoric crocodiles that were absolute units, built for violence, covered in armor, and equipped with jaws that could snap a car in half. Titanoboa would just wrap around them and squeeze until they gave up. The really fun part is that Titanoboa lived in swamps. You know, those peaceful water areas where you definitely want to go swimming. Except back then, you had to worry about a snake the size of a telephone pole grabbing you from underwater. Scientists think it could unhinge its jaw wide enough to swallow a person whole without even trying. Not that it would need to unhinge anything, its regular mouth was probably big enough. And here's what really gets me. This thing lived for millions of years. It wasn't some freak accident of evolution that died out quickly. No. Titanoboa was so good at being a giant murder noodle that it stuck around and dominated South America for ages. Things get even stranger when you realize whales used to hunt other whales. Alright, so we've covered fish that eat themselves to death and snakes that strangle crocodiles for fun. Time to talk about whales. Now, when you think of whales today, you probably think of those gentle giants that sing songs and eat tiny shrimp. Or you think about killer whales and you have nightmares. We're not talking about those ones today though. Most whales, very peaceful, very zen, very much not interested in violence. Well, Basilosaurus missed that memo entirely, it looks like though. This whale lived 40 million years ago and decided that regular whale food was for losers. Instead of filtering water for plankton or deep diving for squid, Basilosaurus looked around the ocean and thought, you know what sounds good for lunch? Other whales. Yeah, this thing was a whale that ate whales, and not just any whales, it specifically targeted its own relatives. Scientists have found smaller whale bones inside Basilosaurus fossils, complete skeletons, which means this thing was swallowing other whales whole. But wait, it gets even worse. Basilosaurus wasn't just grabbing random baby whales, it was hunting adult whales that were 15 feet long. That is not a light snack, that's a full course meal. This thing was built for it too. It was 60 feet long and shaped more like a sea serpent than a modern whale, and packed with shark-style teeth in both jaws. Basically turned the ocean into its personal all-you-can-eat buffet. And everything else is on the menu. And the craziest part? Other whales couldn't do anything about it. Basilosaurus was faster, bigger, and had zero interest in the social contracts that keep modern whales from eating each other. But at least whales stayed in the water. Flying predators were a whole different problem. Flying animals are supposed to be small and delicate, right? Birds, bats, insects, they're all tiny because physics is a thing and gravity doesn't mess around. Well, somebody forgot to tell Quetzalcoatlus about physics. This flying reptile had a wingspan of 36 feet. That's bigger than most airplanes you've been on. And instead of eating fish or berries or whatever normal flying things eat, Quetzalcoatlus walked around on the ground hunting baby dinosaurs. Yeah, you heard that right. This thing could fly, but it preferred to stalk around on foot, looking for small dinosaurs to eat. It was basically a giraffe with wings that had given up on being civilized. The best part? Didn't even need to fly to be terrifying. When it folded up those massive wings and walked on all fours, it was still 16 feet tall. That's tall enough to look into a second-story window, and what it saw in that window would probably become its next meal. Quetzalcoatlus had a beak that was longer than you are tall, and it used that beak to stab things to death. Not bite them, stab them with surgical precision. One quick jab to the head, and whatever it was hunting would just stop. And because apparently being a giant flying death machine wasn't enough, these things might have traveled in groups. Can you imagine looking up and seeing a whole flock of airplane-sized pterosaurs circling overhead? That's a horror movie. They lived right at the end of the dinosaur age, which means they got to hunt dinosaurs until the very last day. T-Rex was dealing with asteroids, and Quetzalcoatlus was still out there picking off anything smaller than a truck. But some birds decided wings were overrated and became land predators instead, and in fact, they are my favorite type of prehistoric bird. After the dinosaurs went extinct, there was this brief moment where mammals probably thought they'd finally caught a break. There were no more giant lizards trying to eat them. It's time to relax and maybe evolve into something bigger. But then South America said, hold my beer, and invented terror birds. When I say terror bird, you should probably be thinking of this guy. These were 10-foot tall, flightless nightmares that looked at the empty dinosaur niche and decided to fill it themselves. They had beaks the size of pickaxes and legs built for running down prey. Think of it like a murder ostrich, because they were fast. Really fast. Fast enough that if you saw one coming, your best bet was just to lie down, accept your fate. Because outrunning a terror bird was not happening. The thing that really gets me about terror birds is how they killed things. They didn't use claws, they didn't bite and shake, but they just ran up to whatever they wanted to eat and started hitting it with their beaks until it died. That's it. That was the whole strategy. Death by repeated blunt force trauma. Oh wait, it wasn't entirely blunt force because see that beak? It's got a nasty hook on it. That's gonna hurt. And it worked perfectly for 60 million years. These birds were so good at being land predators that mammals in South America basically gave up on trying to become large carnivores. Why compete with a 300-pound bird that can run 30 miles per hour and has a beak that can crack your skull open? You're not winning that fight. And some terror birds even made it to North America. They crossed the land bridge and started hunting early horses and camels. Imagine being an early horse, finally making it to a new continent, ready to start your horse life with your horse wife and your horse kids. Oh my God! The terror bird killed my children! No! R.I.P. that horse, man. You gotta respect the horse. He died too young. The only reason we don't have terror birds today is because they eventually ran out of things to hunt, actually. That's a terrifying thought. Most predators try to avoid getting hurt when they hunt. It is common sense. Stay safe, catch food, live another day. But Smilodon apparently never got that memo. These cats had 11-inch fangs sticking out of their faces, which sounds awesome until you realize how many ways that can go wrong. And it went wrong constantly. We found hundreds of Smilodon skulls with broken saber teeth. No, not chipped, not cracked, but completely snapped off, which means these cats were getting into fights so intense that their main weapons were getting destroyed on a regular basis. But did they learn from this? Did they maybe try being a little more careful? Nope, they just kept doing it. The La Brea tar pits in California are packed with Smilodon bones. A huge chunk of them show signs of serious injuries. Broken ribs, healed fractures, puncture wounds from other Smilodon fangs. These cats were basically walking around covered in scars from fights they picked with each other. And they weren't even fighting over food most of the time. They were just fighting because they felt like it. One fossil shows a Smilodon that had its entire jaw broken and then healed wrong. This cat lived for months with a busted face and apparently just dealt with it. No big deal, just another day for a saber-toothed cat. They also had arms that were built for wrestling. Not running, not climbing, but yes, wrestling. Their whole hunting strategy was to tackle something massive and then try to stab it in the throat while it fought back. And most of this time, it worked out fine. Sometimes the prey won, and sometimes other Smilodons showed up to steal the kill, which led to more fighting and more broken teeth. But saber teeth are nothing compared to jaws that could crush an elephant's bones. There's only one fossil of Andrewsarchus, and it's just a skull, but that skull is 3 feet long and built for destruction. This thing lived in Mongolia about 45 million years ago, and based on that one massive head, scientists think the whole animal was about the size of a horse. Except if you're not up to date on your horse lore, horses eat grass. Andrewsarchus ate everything else. The skull is basically a bone-crushing machine. It's a long snout packed with different types of teeth. Sharp ones for cutting, flat ones for grinding, and some truly impressive canines for grabbing onto things that didn't want to be grabbed. What makes Andrewsarchus special is that it didn't just eat meat. It ate bones too. In fact, the back teeth are designed specifically for cracking open bones to get at the marrow inside. Nothing was wasted. Vegans might actually love what this animal does because it doesn't waste any of its meal. And when you're walking around with a 3-foot skull full of bone-crushing teeth, you don't really need to worry about competition. Most predators from that time were much smaller. They would make a kill, and then Andrewsarchus would show up and everyone else would just leave. What are you gonna do? Fight the thing that can bite your head off? The really wild part is that Andrewsarchus probably didn't even hunt most of the time. Why bother? Just wait for something else to do the hard work, then show up and take over. It's the ultimate bully strategy that we still see in society today. Just look at the human species. That is our entire hunting strategy against each other. We think it could run pretty fast too, which is terrifying. Nothing quite like being chased by a 1,000-pound wolf thing with jaws that can crack elephant bones. Fortunately, we'll never know exactly how scary Andrewsarchus really was because all we have is that one skull. But sometimes one skull is enough to give you nightmares. But at another time in history in the world, Australia decided to make things worse by creating a venomous giant lizard. Australia has this problem where it takes normal animals and makes them absolutely horrible. Jellyfish that can, oh wait, look here, my notepad says they can kill you. Everything in Australia is just dangerous. And prehistoric Australia, it's even worse. So obviously, when Australia got its hands on monitor lizards, they had to make one the size of a car. Megalania was a 20-foot lizard that weighed as much as an elephant, because regular giant lizards are for amateurs. Now, if you don't know much about biology, usually large versions of creatures aren't the venomous ones. When you think of scorpions, the bigger scorpions usually use their claws for crushing as it's more effective. The smaller creatures end up using the more lethal venom. This was not the case with Megalania. This thing also lived alongside early humans in Australia, which explains a lot about why Aboriginal stories are full of references to giant man-eating reptiles. Turns out those were not legends, those were the safety warnings. Megalania had a bite that could deliver enough venom to drop a water buffalo, but it wouldn't kill it quickly. No, that would be too merciful. It was just enough to make it weak and sick so it couldn't fight back while being eaten alive. Modern monitor lizards are scary smart for reptiles. They plan, they problem solve, and they remember where they left food. Megalania had all of that intelligence packed into a 1,500-pound body with a toxic bite. And the worst part, it could run faster than you. Way faster. Those stubby legs could push all of that weight at speeds that would definitely start making you rethink every life choice that led to being chased by a giant venomous lizard. Megalania went extinct about 50,000 years ago, right around the time humans showed up in Australia. So thankfully, we didn't have to coexist with them for very long. Which, yes, again means that for a few thousand years, early humans had to deal with these things. Honestly, the fact that anyone survived living in prehistoric Australia is impressive. Between the giant lizards, the giant crocodiles, and the giant everything else, probably giant koalas or something, it was basically nature's attempt at a horror movie. Long before any of these existed, something ruled the land with a sail. But how long ago am I talking? Well, before dinosaurs existed. Before mammals figured out how to be scary, there was Dimetrodon, and it looked completely insane. You might have grown up thinking this was a dinosaur, but it's actually not. It was a reptile, and this thing had a giant sail on its back. But it wasn't for swimming, it was for being dramatic. It was one of nature's first attempts at making something to look intimidating, and they went way overboard. Dimetrodon lived 280 million years ago, back when the continents were still figuring out where they wanted to be and everything on land was an experimental mess. Most animals were still pretty small and cautious. Dimetrodon showed up and decided to be 15 feet long with a fin sticking out of its back. And it worked. Nothing else knew how to deal with this sailboat lizard walking around eating everything. The sail wasn't just for looking scary either. It helped regulate body temperature, which gave Dimetrodon a huge advantage. While other predators were sitting around waiting to warm up in the morning, Dimetrodon was already out hunting. Its teeth were custom built for different jobs too. It had sharp ones in front for grabbing prey, cutting teeth in the middle for slicing, and crushing teeth in the back for bones. It was a walking Swiss Army knife with anger issues. In fact, fossil evidence shows Dimetrodon would bite chunks out of anything it could catch. Fish, amphibians, early reptiles. If it moved and was smaller than Dimetrodon, it was food. The sail also made for great advertising. Any other predator looking at Dimetrodon would see this massive fin and think, yeah, I'll find something else to eat today, which was probably a smart choice. Dimetrodon dominated for about 25 billion years, which in prehistoric terms is forever. In fact, it was so successful that when it finally went extinct, it took another few billion years for anything to evolve that was equally good at being a land predator. But the real masters of prehistoric violence actually had saber teeth and bad attitudes. Right before Earth decided to kill off 90% of everything that was alive, there was Inostrancevia, and it spent its final few million years being absolutely furious about everything. This was a mammal-ish creature with 6-inch saber teeth and zero patience for anything that moved. It lived in what's now Russia during a time where the weather was terrible, the food was scarce, and everything was stressed out about the upcoming apocalypse. And Inostrancevia dealt with this stress by biting things until they stopped moving. Those saber teeth weren't delicate little fangs. They were thick, curved daggers designed for stabbing through armor. And everything back then had armor because living in pre-extinction Russia was basically a war zone. One fossil shows an Inostrancevia that died while attacking a heavily armored plant eater. Neither animal survived the fight, which tells you everything you need to know about how committed Inostrancevia was to violence. Even when food was available, Inostrancevia would fight other Inostrancevia over it. Multiple skulls show puncture marks from other Inostrancevia teeth. They were literally stabbing each other in the face during dinner. The jaw muscles on these things were huge. They could open their mouths wide enough to get those sabers around pretty much anything, and snap them shut with enough force to punch through bone. And they were built for grappling too. They had strong arms, powerful claws, and a low center of gravity. Once Inostrancevia grabbed onto something, that something was having a very bad day. They lived right up until the Permian extinction wiped them out along with mostly everything else on the world, which is probably for the best because the world wasn't ready for saber-toothed mammals with anger management issues to stick around for another few 100 million years. Water wasn't any safer thanks to scorpions the size of cars. Scorpions belong on land where they can be properly avoided. Jaekelopterus missed that memo and decided to become an 8-foot aquatic nightmare instead. This is basically what happens when you take a regular scorpion, feed it nothing but protein shakes and trend for a few million years, and then dump it in a river. Except instead of a stinger, it had massive claws that could grab onto anything stupid enough to swim nearby. And everything at the time was stupid enough to swim nearby because fish hadn't evolved the good sense of being afraid of giant scorpions yet. Jaekelopterus had compound eyes the size of dinner plates, which gave it excellent vision for spotting prey underwater. Once it saw something it wanted to eat, those huge claws would shoot out and grab it before it knew what was happening. The claws had serrated edges on the inside for extra grip, so not only was this thing strong enough to crush most fish, but it also had built-in knives for anything that tried to escape. But here's where it gets weird. Jaekelopterus was also cannibalistic. We found smaller sea scorpions inside bigger sea scorpions' stomachs. They were eating each other just because they could. They also had no problem coming onto land when they felt like it. The only reason Jaekelopterus didn't take over the planet is because it lived during the Devonian period, back when everything was still figuring out how to exist properly. But for about 30 million years, rivers and lakes were basically off limits to anything smaller than a crocodile. Even today's giant river monsters would think twice about swimming in Devonian waters. But hold up, because land scorpions decide to get on the action too. Walking through a forest 340 million years ago meant stepping very, very carefully, because under every log and pile of leaves was a scorpion the size of a house cat waiting to ruin your day. Pulmonoscorpius was 2 feet long and had enough venom to drop animals much bigger than itself. Certain modern scorpions can already mess you up pretty bad. Now imagine one that weighs 15 pounds and has claws that could grab your entire hand. The venom was the real problem though. Small scorpions today can put you in the hospital. Pulmonoscorpius could probably kill a horse with one sting. It was fast enough to catch anything that tried to run away. But what made Pulmonoscorpius truly awful was how patient it was. Modern scorpions can sit perfectly still for hours waiting for prey to walk by. A giant scorpion had all day, all week if necessary. They were smart enough to pick their spots. Pulmonoscorpius would find the perfect hiding place near water or along animal trails and just wait. Something would eventually come along looking for a drink, and boom, it was dinner time. The forests were full of these things too. Not just 1 or 2 lurking around, but hundreds of them. Every shadow could be hiding a dinner plate-sized arachnid with murder on its mind. They also fought each other when they met, which means even other giant scorpions weren't safe. 2-foot scorpions having territory disputes with their claws and stingers out sounds like something from a nightmare. Pulmonoscorpius went extinct when the climate got too dry for them, which is probably the only reason mammals ever got big enough to evolve into something interesting. It's hard to grow past mouse size when every step outside might land you next to a venomous monster. But none of these animals compare to Earth's very first killing machine. 500 million years ago, the ocean was full of small, harmless creatures just trying to figure out how to exist. Then Anomalocaris showed up and invented murder. This is thought to be Earth's first apex predator, and it looked absolutely ridiculous. It was 3 feet long, with a soft body, swimming fins down the sides, and 2 spiky arms sticking out of its head for grabbing prey. Plus it had compound eyes, bigger than your fist. But ridiculous or not, Anomalocaris changed everything. Before it evolved, ocean animals were mostly just floating around eating bacteria and hoping nothing bad ever happened. After Anomalocaris, every creature had to start worrying about being eaten, and Anomalocaris was very good at eating things. Those grabbing arms could snatch up anything smaller than itself, which was mostly everything back then. The mouth was also circular and full of hard plates that could crush shells and tear soft flesh apart. Trilobites started growing spines and thicker shells just to avoid getting grabbed by Anomalocaris. Some developed the ability to roll into balls, and others learned to bury themselves in the mud. But Anomalocaris adapted too, because different species evolved different hunting strategies. Some became better at crushing armored prey, and others specialized in soft targets. And they spread everywhere. Anomalocaris fossils show up all over the world, which means these things were dominating oceans from the coasts of Canada to the coasts of China. The scary part is how good Anomalocaris was at its job. It ruled the seas for 20 million years, which again in evolutionary terms is forever. Nothing could challenge it, nothing was big enough or mean enough to fight back. Anomalocaris basically wrote the playbook for being a predator. Grab prey with arms, crush with mouth, repeat until everything else evolves armor or learns to hide. But even that first killer seems tame compared to the other whale that hunted other whales. Modern sperm whales are gentle giants that eat squid and sing sad songs to each other. Livyatan looked at that whole peaceful lifestyle and decided to become a serial killer instead. This whale had teeth, and not the tiny vestigial ones that modern sperm whales hide in their jaws, but actual 14-inch fangs that could bite through bone. Both the upper and lower jaws were packed with them, and Livyatan used those teeth to hunt other whales. And not small whales either, but full-grown baleen whales that were minding their own business, filtering krill and living their best whale lives. Livyatan would swim up from below and just start biting chunks off them until they died. The skull alone was 10 feet long and built for ramming. Livyatan could headbutt a whale unconscious and then eat it at its leisure. But here's where it gets wild. Livyatan shared the ocean with the Megalodon. Yes, two apex predators, both the size of school buses, both convinced they own the sea. They probably ran into each other occasionally, and when they did, it wasn't pretty. We found whale bones with gouges that matched Livyatan teeth right next to shark bite marks. These two monsters were having territorial disputes over who got to eat what. Livyatan had one major advantage though. It was smart. Modern whales are incredibly intelligent. They plan, they cooperate, they hold grudges. Livyatan had all of that intelligence plus a mouthful of daggers and a serious attitude problem. The ocean 10 million years ago was not a place you would want to go swimming. Between giant sharks with car-sized jaws and psychotic whales with foot-long teeth, pretty much everything in the water was trying to eat everything else. Livyatan went extinct, but honestly, that's probably for the best. So there you have it, a bunch of different creatures that make your modern predators look like a house cat. If you enjoyed learning about any of these creatures in this video, I invite you to like this video and comment down below what other creatures you'd like to learn about. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our future uploads, and hit the hype button on this video to help our video get shown to more people if you think it deserves so. And if you want to watch another one of my videos, you can click the video on screen now to watch it.